Good afternoon. Happy Thanksgiving month and welcome to the November Wonders of the World or WOW lecture series. WOW is sponsored by the Friends of the Lafayette Library and Learning Center, which is the all-volunteer organization that sells used books to support the Lafayette Library. And I'm Ellen Reinches, the volunteer coordinator for the WOW program. Our topic today is a history of Mount Diablo State Park, which is celebrating its centennial in 2021. And our speaker today is Stephen Smith, the president of Mount Diablo Interpretative Association. Friends of the library are continuing to offer the WOW lectures and the Sweet Thursday author events online as webinars. We're in the process of scheduling new programs, and here are a few of the coming attractions. The next 3 WOWs are scheduled in Zoom, and there will be registration links in the follow-up email tomorrow. On Wednesday, December 8th, April Angevine, our popular independent art speaker, will deliver her new talk about mid-century abstractionists. That's mid-20th century. And on Wednesday, January 12th, WOW will host a docent from the Legion of Honor who will discuss the exhibit Color into Line, the history of pastels from the Renaissance to the present. And on Wednesday, February 29th, April will return with a new lecture about California ceramics titled Let's Talk Tabletop. And that should be interesting and very colorful. Next week, Thursday is next week on November 18th at 5 p.m. when Sweet Thursday will host author Gail Tsukiyama with her historical novel, The Color of Air, which is set in Hawaii. There will not be a Sweet Thursday in December, and starting in January, some of the Sweet Thursdays will start being held in person in the library in the Don Tatson Community Hall. And I'm pleased to announce that just this week, we have confirmed a collaboration between WOW and Sweet Thursday for March 2022. And we did one in March of this year, and that turned out quite well. For the upcoming one, we will host author Gabrielle Seltz in a discussion of her recently released book, Light on Fire, The Art and Life of Sam Francis. And we will have more information available on this in future programs. If you've missed one of our webinars or loved it so much you want to watch it again or tell your friends about it, you can visit our YouTube channel where you can find all the webinars we have been permitted to record. And that can be found at tinyurl.com/friends-LLC-YouTube. And we will be recording today's webinar, and it should be available in a few days. To ask questions today, we ask you to please use the Q&A function on your computer or device. Please type in the question, and at the end of the lecture, we will choose a selection of questions to answer. Since there are audience members who may be new to the Lafayette Library, and there are always some, I'd like to share best with you how to learn about and sign up for our upcoming lectures. There's 2 basic ways. The first is to get on the weekly email list put out on Saturday mornings by the Library Foundation. There is a subscribe function on the Foundation's website, and you can find that at llcf.org/subscribe. Alternatively, you can go to the Contra Costa Library website, ccclib.org, where there's an events tab at the top, and that will take you to upcoming events. Now, there may be a large list here because these are all the events scheduled through the 26 branch libraries and central administration in the Contra Costa system. However, you can get it down to a manageable number through the filters on the left, for example, by location or type of event or age group. And now a little bit about the Friends of the Library. For many, many years, we have sold donated used books to support the library. We have a retail store called Friends Corner Bookshop, which is located on the lower level of the library building on the back on Golden Gate Way. And it houses about 20,000 affordably priced volumes. And we also sell higher value books through the Friends store on Amazon. And with these funds, we support the library in many ways. We support extended hours when it's open on Sunday, but none of the libraries this year are open on Sundays. We also purchase books and related materials. We support the library programs, not only our own, but also put on by the librarians for people of all ages, from children through seniors. We also provide some support for our partners in the facility and for the facilities themselves. If you're interested in purchasing books from the Friends to support the library or donating, you can go to the Friends website. You can find that at llcf.org/friends-book-shop. And there you can find such things as the hours and the guidelines for donations, and not to mention the all-important Amazon button. Now I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Stephen Smith, who is taking time out from his workday to present this talk. Steve is a Danville native and hiking enthusiast and leader who acts as a natural history docent and volunteer team leader for trail signage and maintenance projects in the park. He is also the president of Mount Diablo Interpretative Association and oversees its many programs and committees that solely benefit Mount Diablo State Park. So thank you for joining us today, Steve, and I will stop sharing my slides.
Oh, thank you so much, Ellen. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for attending. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and we'll get started. Okay, so we developed this webinar in conjunction with our Centennial. We are celebrating our 100th birthday as a state park this year. And we had a grand gala festivities a couple of weekends ago out at the campus of the college, CSU East Bay. And we had about 600 people attend, so it was a rousing success, and we had a great time. There is a companion video that we developed in preparation for the Centennial, and I'll talk about that more later. But I would like to talk to you about the history of Mount Diablo. Any one of these bullet points, I could talk for an hour on each, so we'll kind of go through these rather quickly, but hopefully you'll gain some knowledge of the park. We'll start with our native peoples, and that is the Bay Miwok. We have 6 major tribes: the Volvon, which were in the Livermore area, the Tatkan, who were in the Danville San Ramon area, the Saklan, who are in your area, the Lafayette area, the Chupkan in Concord, the Ompin out towards the Carquinez Straits in Benicia, the Yurupun over on the east side towards Antioch and Pittsburgh. But it was the Volvon who held the peak itself. And they were called by the Spanish the Cerro Alto de los Bobones, or the high point of the Volvons. The native peoples believed in creation stories that told of a time of a great flood in which only 2 islands existed, the 2 highest peaks of Mount Diablo. When the waters finally receded, the Creator created the world as it is known today. There are many names for the mountain, including Oompile from the northern Sierra Miwok, the Supe-Menenu from the central Sierra Miwok, the Sukuyaman from the Nisinan, and the most common in this area is from the northern Ohlone, Tuushjak. There was a great gathering of the tribes during autumn harvests. They would, of course, harvest acorns, and it was a grand celebration time where they would intermarry into other tribes. They would have grand ceremonies, and though they worked hard to sustain their life, they all knew the joy that came with enjoying each other. And so this was a great celebratory time. But that all came to a blow when the Spanish arrived. The first of 2 men came here, Fages and Crespi. Pedro Fages was a Spanish soldier, an explorer, a first lieutenant governor of the Californias under Gaspar de Portola. In November 1770, Fages led an expedition from Monterey by land to San Francisco Bay. Fages found a route through present-day Salinas and the Santa Clara Valley, which is roughly today's US 101. Fages' new trail became the preferred route, and missions were later established along that road at Mission San Juan Bautista, Mission Santa Clara, and Mission San Jose. Fages set out from San Diego again in 1772, establishing another new trail into the San Joaquin Valley, this time accompanied by Friar Juan Crespi, who kept a daily journal. The party continued north along San Pablo Bay, but was prevented from going further north by the Carquinez Strait. And so they followed the bay around to the east and climbed the slopes of Mount Diablo. They became the first Europeans thus to see the Sacramento-San Joaquin River Delta, the Central Valley of California, and the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Seeing that it was impossible to cross the wide river without boats, the party looped back around to return to San Jose through today's Contra Costa County, roughly following what is today I-680. The California missions began in the late 18th century as an effort to convert Native Americans to Catholicism and expand European territory. Founded on June 11, 1797, the Mission San Jose comprised land reaching far and wide from the south boundary of what is now Alameda County to the Sacramento River at the north, and from San Francisco Bay to a summit on the Coast Range. The entire San Ramon Valley was granted to Mission San Jose. Many of the Bay Miwok were fiercely opposed to mission life and often fought with Spanish soldiers who were tasked with returning natives to the missions where they were converted. This marks a dark time in history in which the subjugation and enslavement of the native peoples decimated their culture, and exposure to European illness and disease wrought havoc. While there are many versions of the naming lore of Mount Diablo, this is the generally accepted one, in which is based on General Mariano Vallejo's 1850 report to the state legislature. As the Spanish continued their effort at missionization and the Bay Miwok resisted, conflicts abounded. One such occurrence happened in the territory of the Chupkan near Concord, in which the tribe members were cornered and a standoff ensued. In the middle of the night, the natives seemingly vanished into a dense thicket. The dumbfounded soldiers, who were perhaps also embarrassed, called the area Monte del Diablo, or Thicket of the Devil. Anglo settlers misinterpreted the word monte as meaning mountain, and they affixed the name to the nearby tall peak. Thus, the mountain became Mount Diablo. In 1833, 2 ranchos were granted by the Mexican government in the San Ramon Valley, both of which called Ranchos San Ramon. The rancho era began with lands from former mission areas, as the cattle and sheep brought to these ranchos were former mission livestock. Cattle hides and tallow provided the economic basis for ranchos. Jose Maria Amador's Rancho San Ramon included 20,000 acres, which is headquartered near today's Dublin, and he employed Indian and Mexican workers and developed an industrial center which produced leather goods, harnesses, wagons, and furniture. The Mission San Jose became a parish church with no more control over the Indians in 1836. The Indians scattered to work on the ranchos and at the pueblo of San Jose. Some more recent recruits went back to their tribes in the Central Valley, and on a rancheria in Pleasanton called Alisal, Indians from different tribes preserved their customs and traditional religious practices for many years. In 1834, the Rancho Arroyo de las Nueces y Bobones, or the Rancho Miguel, a 17,000-acre land grant given to Don Juana Sanchez de Pacheco, included Pine Canyon, Little Pine Canyon, and the Northgate Road area, including Diablo and Turtle Rock ranches. Approximately 1/4 of this land grant is now within the state park today. And that ushered in the era of private lands, and this man, John Marsh, who was an early pioneer and settler in Alta, California, the first Harvard graduate and the first to practice medicine here. In 1837, he purchased the 17,000-acre Rancho Los Maganos, a land grant from Mexican immigrant Jose Noriega, on what is now called Marsh Creek. The price he paid for the rancho was $500, which was all of his savings. He thus became the first non-Hispanic white settler in what is now Contra Costa County. Marsh prospered there, both as a rancher and as a doctor, and continued to invest by purchasing more land near his original rancho. Before his death, he claimed that his rancho contained about 40,000 acres of land. In 1841, the first American immigrant party, the Bartleson Bidwell Party, came to California from Missouri. Marsh had invited them to be his guests, and thus the California Trail terminated on his ranch in Brentwood. On September 24, 1856, he began a journey from his land in eastern Contra Costa County to do some business in San Francisco. On the road between Pacheco and Martinez, he was ambushed and murdered by 3 of his vaquero employees over a dispute about their wages. In 1873, William Cameron began buying land in the Green Valley. Several railroads also began purchasing land, and in time, a single owner of the Big Four emerged, Central Pacific Railroad, which appointed David Colton to manage the 10,000-acre railroad ranch. He was given Mark Hopkins' share and in time bought out Crocker, Huntington, and Stanford. Colton's daughter, Caroline, and her husband, mining engineer Dan Cook, inherited the railroad ranch, which by then extended from Green Valley School to Sycamore Valley and to Curry Creek, taking in the headwaters of Marsh Creek, Southern Summit Road, and the Mountain House Hotel, which we'll talk about later. Brothers Dan and Seth Cook were, quote, both rough, obscenity-speaking, and hearty fellows, according to Robert Noble Burgess, and they changed the name to Cook Farms. Seth Cook, a bachelor, inherited and passed the farm to his niece Louise and her husband John F. Boyd. Boyd renamed it the Oakwood Park Stock Farms, and by 1897, it included 6,000 acres. In 1913, it had grown to 15,000 acres, including areas of Dan Cook Canyon, Rock City, Devil's Slide, and the area along Southgate Road. It was at the time considered the largest stock farm in the world. Horse racing was a particularly fond event on the racetrack located on the grounds. This man, Robert Noble Burgess, in 1912, Louise Boyd had sold our Oakwood Park Stock Farm to him and his Mount Diablo Development Company, a group of investors who wanted to create an exclusive residential park. They remodeled Cook's clubhouse as the Mount Diablo Country Club and opened Mount Diablo to the public. Burgess then acquired the area later known as Black Hawk Ranch and all the land between it and Diablo up to the summit, including the right-of-way to Mount Diablo Scenic Boulevard. More on that in a moment. In 1917, World War I raged and Burgess went bankrupt as Diablo declined. Most of the Diablo lands defaulted to investors or to their original owners. Burgess is often incorrectly credited for Mount Diablo State Park's creation, although he did play a part. But starting in 1919, Walter Frick reassembled many of the parcels Burgess had controlled into the 10,000-acre Diablo Ranch. In 1921, soon after Frick's Diablo purchases began, Mount Diablo State Park was dedicated a state park and game refuge on 630 acres at the summit. More on that in a bit. What's rarely mentioned is that it was a designation, not an ownership. In 1931, the park was rededicated after the purchase of 2 areas stretching up Southgate Road to include Rock City. And by 1937, 7 purchases had been made, including the state park summit. and all but 19 acres of the 2,000-acre park, including 3/4 of the summit, were purchased from Walter Frick. Surveying is important for the mountain. The original plan for California was to establish one initial point, but surveying the public lands in California was no easy task. Because of the size of the state and the steepness of terrain in many areas, the Surveyor General of the United States decided that 3 initial points were needed. These points were established on Mount Diablo in Contra Costa County in 1851, on San Bernardino Mountain in San Bernardino County in 1852, and on Mount Pierce in Humboldt County in 1853. In July 1851, this man, Colonel Leander Ransom, General Land Office Deputy Surveyor, was under instructions from the Surveyor General for California to establish the initial point on Mount Diablo's summit. In oppressive summer heat that year, he labored through dense brush, up the steep terrain to get to the top of the mountain. There, he chiseled a hole in solid rock on the highest point and erected a flagpole to be used as a site to establish monuments on the base and meridian lines. Ransom then went due south 12 miles and set additional monuments to establish the meridian line. He continued setting monuments due east, due north, and due west of the initial point on the summit, thereby establishing the Mount Diablo base and meridian lines. He began on July 17th and completed his survey on August 31st of 1851. In 1861, Josiah Whitney's California Geological Survey visited Mount Diablo for 10 days. This man, William Brewer, was the head botanist on the survey and wrote, quote, "The region north and northwest of Mount Diablo is a beautiful one. Pretty valleys scattered over with oaks, many of enormous size with wide branches, often dropping like the elm. The rugged mountain rises against the clear sky, and when illuminated by the setting sun, is an object of peculiar beauty. Our camp was in a very pretty place, with great trees around, and the mountain in full view," end quote. The survey gathered rocks, fossils, and plants, including 25 were not then known. You may or may not be aware, but if you check the references on your deeded property, Mount Diablo is the starting point for the establishment of land boundaries throughout most of Northern California and all of Nevada. Brewer estimated that the view embraced 80,000 square miles, 40,000 in tolerably plain view over 300 miles from north to south and 280 miles from east to west. The view includes 60% of California, 35 counties, and an area equal to the 6 New England states combined. Brewer's party calculated the height of Mount Diablo at 3876.4, but we know today that the actual elevation is 3849. Tourism has always been important on the mountain. In 1873, Joseph Hall conceived of building a hotel on the mountain after having done the same in New Hampshire's Mount Washington. He told investors that Mount Diablo was, quote, "had more rare attractions to the lover of nature and fine mountain scenery than any mountain of the same altitude, perhaps in the world," end quote. Mountain House would have 16 rooms and was very popular for weddings, christenings, and family occasions. The first thing he needed, though, were roads. And on November 4th of 1873, the Mount Diablo Summit Road Company was formed and financed an 8-mile road from Ignacio Valley through Pine Canyon. A second company called the Green Valley and Mount Diablo Road Company financed a 3-mile road from Danville through Green Valley. At a 0.1 mile from the summit, the two roads would meet and the hotel would be built and opened in May of 1874. In the first month alone, 800 people used the roads and visited the hotel. In 1874, Sealy J. Bennett inaugurated a stage line from Martinez to the Diablo Peak, and by 1879 included hundreds of visitors a year. Kate Nevins, who had worked at the Mountain House, wrote, quote, "Citizens from all over the state made pilgrimage with wagon loads, journeying to the Mountain House, then hiking to the observatory at the top. They stayed sometimes for weeks to enjoy Pine Canyon, one of the finest beauty spots on earth, with its magnificent views of the Castle Rocks," end quote. In 1876, a 3-story signal station was built on the summit as part of a government survey. Mr. Hall, who lived with his family in the Mountain House Hotel, took the opportunity to install a telescope at the top of the station with seating all around it, making the hotel and the summit even more popular. In July of 1891, a fire burned much of the east side of Diablo and put the telescope out of commission. Business trailed off following the fire, either due to the extent of the fire or because rumors had spread that the hotel was also burned. The Mountain House Hotel eventually closed in 1895. Because local ranchers objected to the hotel and the tourists who were traveling across their land, they successfully petitioned the Board of Supervisors to limit access to the roads. They argued that tourists had started the fire in 1891, and so gates were installed and keys were needed, as well as permission, in order to travel on Hall's roads. In 1901, the empty hotel burned to the ground. Tourists, particularly students and teachers from Cal Berkeley, were still hiking to the hotel across ranch lands. Mysteriously, all of the doors and windows of the hotel had been found in a nearby creek. Arson was suspected but couldn't be proven. Indeed, a ranch hand on his deathbed confessed to starting the blaze at the rancher's behest. He was instructed to remove the doors and windows first, because without them, the fire could not be ruled arson of a dwelling. And so a park was formed. In 1921, this man, State Senator Will Sharkey of Martinez, successfully sponsored a bill in Sacramento declaring 630 acres near the summit of Diablo a state park and game refuge. Though no funding was attached for actual purchase, a park commission was formed and a ceremony planned. On June 19th, 1921, a ceremony was held at the summit of Mount Diablo. The dedication concluded with performances at the summit by a band from Martinez and chorale singers accompanied on a piano. As far as known, this is the first and only piano to have successfully summited the mountain. In 1927, Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. prepared a California State Park survey for the newly formed State Park Commission. He recommended the acquisition of 5,000 to 6,000 acres on Mount Diablo to amplify and round out the small state park already located at the summit. In 1930, Californians passed a $6 million bond measure that included money for Mount Diablo State Park, and it paved the way for major property acquisitions along Mount Diablo Scenic Boulevard, Northgate Road, and the summit. With newly acquired lands and funding, a second dedication of the mountain was in order and was planned to be quite extravagant. And so on April 26th of that year, a car caravan started out in Martinez, and passing through each city, more cars would be added until there were a total of 500 cars in the caravan. Among the passengers was the dignitary of the day, this man, the California State Governor, Sonny Jim Rolfe. Now, as they headed out, people were gathering at Rock City. They were driving their cars up the roads and gathering to watch the rodeo riders from Livermore. Several school and college bands were playing, but it had begun to rain. When the car caravan had started out from Martinez, it was drizzling, And the closer they got to the mountain, the harder it started to rain. By the time they had rounded through Danville and the small town of Diablo, it was raining hard, and a thunderclap rode out. Sonny Jim Rolfe, who had been drinking all day long, awoke with a start and convinced that the 21-gun salute in his honor had started without him. His passengers in the car remarked that it was going to be a long day, for the governor was already 3 sheets to the wind. Because the road was treacherous and it was raining so hard, they decided to pull over into the town of Diablo and use the country club for their dedication ceremony. Meanwhile, all the revelers had assembled at Rock City were stuck and mired in the mud from the deluge. But the rodeo riders were there with their lassos and saved the day by roping the cars and dragging them out of the mud. The brand new park superintendent, who had started his job only weeks earlier, checked himself into the Martinez Psychiatric Hospital a couple days later, overwhelmed by the entire experience. And thus, the ceremony of 1931 concluded. In 1912, Burgess completed the purchase of Oakwood Park Stock Farm, 6,000 acres for $150,000. And in a matter of months, he bought another 5,000 acres that included the summit of Diablo. In short order, ranch buildings were converted to recreational use, a golf course was built, and the land around the core of the ranch was subdivided into half-acre lots. Before long, ads in the San Francisco newspapers were trumpeting the virtues of Mount Diablo Estates, an unusual departure in the development of country life with prices and terms such to be within the reach of the many. Between 1912 and 1915, Burgess also built Mount Diablo Scenic Boulevard, with one branch from Ignacio and the other from Danville, following much of the old stage road of Hall. Early on in the days of the automobile, races were held on the winding roads of the mountain to see who could make it to the top in the fastest time. Certainly a harrowing journey on these windy roads. All of this, the acquisition of lands and the building of the road, was an elaborate scheme to build a grand hotel and tavern at the top of the mountain. It was to be called the Torre del Sol, or the Tower of the Sun. It looked suspiciously similar to what would become Hearst Castle, because the main financier was none other than William Randolph Hearst. World War I intervened with these plans, however, and building of residential lots in the foothills foundered, and Hearst backed out. Burgess filed for bankruptcy in 1917, and it was at this time that Walter Frick began buying up much of the mountain. In the late 1920s, the U.S. Department of Commerce sought to establish airplane routes throughout the country and encouraged private businesses to construct beacon lights for nighttime navigation. Standard Oil agreed to build the lights on the West Coast, and Mount Diablo was chosen as the site in Northern California. A 75-foot steel tower with a 10 million candle power beacon on top was hoped to booster a market for aviation fuel being produced in Richmond. It advertised itself by placing large letters on the tower, SD, for Standard Diablo. On April 25th, 1928, Charles Lindbergh turned on the beacon remotely from Denver. The light rotated 6 times per minute and flashed every 10 seconds and was visible from 100 miles on a clear night. The beacon operated until December 7th, 1941, with the attack on Pearl Harbor darkening the light. Following the war, the beacon was no longer needed with the advent of radar, and the light was dark until December 7th of 1964. On that day, Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of Pacific Forces during World War II, attended a ceremony on Mount Diablo's summit. The ceremony commemorated survivors of Pearl Harbor, and he suggested that the beacon be lit every December 7th to honor those who served and sacrificed. The beacon was lit by Save Mount Diablo every Sunday night during the pandemic to honor emergency workers and to bring light to a dark time. During the 1930s and the height of the Great Depression, the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Works Progress Administration, the CCC and the WPA, were formed to put young men and war veterans to work and to build the country's infrastructure. On October 22nd, 1938, men from the CCC Company 2932V, all veterans, arrived at the park and were assigned to Camp Mount Diablo. They carved and realigned park roads, developed hiking and fire trails, built residence and maintenance buildings, culverts and drainages, designed campground and picnic sites, and built the Summit Museum. The hardest work at the Summit building was building the stone structure and transferring the beacon from the old tower to the top of the new building. Much of the stone used to build the structure was quarried on the mountain near what is Fossil Ridge, and many fossils can be seen today in the walls. CCC crews completed their work on the mountain and departed August 15, 1941. The Summit building today houses a museum, a media room, and a gift shop operated by MDIA, and it remains a major tourist attraction and provides an observation deck to survey the entire region and that world-famous view. The story of Mary Bowerman begins with the rare and endemic Mount Diablo buckwheat, which nobody seems to have seen on the mountain since 1903. But in the 1930s, then a young botany graduate student at UC Berkeley, Mary found some specimens on the slopes of Mount Diablo. As she later explained, quote, she hadn't thought much of Mount Diablo and of being anything special. When her professor at Berkeley assigned her to study it in 1930, he chose her because she happened to have a car. As she explored the mountain in the ensuing years, however, Bowerman grew fascinated with the beauty and complexity of its plant life. She visited over 100 times as a student and collected many hundreds of plant species. And in 1932, she surprised her thesis advisor, eminent botanist Willis Lynn Jepson, by proposing to write her doctoral dissertation on the entire mountain's vegetation and the way that it interacted with the environment. In 1944, she published The Flowering Plants and Ferns of Mount Diablo, California, and it remains to this day as the leading reference. A large fire on the mountain in 1977 caused some controversy when a local newspaper began raising funds to reseed the mountain with non-native Monterey pines. Bowerman was outraged and rallied behind the notion that the mountain would resprout and regenerate itself. She won the argument, and the monies raised were used instead to open the Fire Interpretive Trail around the summit, eventually renamed in her honor to the Mary Bowerman Trail. The trail offers nearly a quarter mile of ADA accessibility and 3/4 of a mile of hiking through very diverse natural habitat. It's one of the most popular hikes on the mountain. Growth in the area was light until after World War II, with the opening of the Caldecott and the many returning GIs looking for suburban life. Over the years, Mary Bowerman's fascination with the mountain's natural habitats had evolved into a passion to save them from the forces threatening to overrun them. Bowerman was persistent as well as erudite. She would surprise local landowners by asking them what could be done to protect the mountain. When Bowerman moved from Berkeley to Lafayette in 1954, she became active in local conservation, but found that Mount Diablo often took a backseat to other causes. So she started asking, what can we do for the mountain? In 1971, Bowerman's persistence led Art Bonwell, an engineer who hiked and biked the mountain, suggested that they start an organization dedicated to protecting the mountain. What became Save Mount Diablo held its first meeting in December of that year, with 20 participants chipping in a quarter each to get the minutes mailed out. Where public bodies were short of money to buy important areas that became available, SMD often raised the funds to acquire them with the idea of eventually transferring them to public ownership. SMD opposed subdivisions that encroached on significant natural habitats and tried to mitigate urbanization by encouraging owners to dedicate parts of their lands to conservation. An early achievement involved the huge Black Hawk subdivision. In the 1970s, SMD negotiated for 2,052 acres of the property's 4,200 acres to be dedicated to the state park as a condition of development, including many of the most scenic areas on the mountain's southwest flank, like the Black Hills, Wall Point, Black Hawk Ridge, and parts of Dan Cook and Jackass Canyons. In 1974, an all-volunteer nonprofit was founded to assist California state parks in conserving, maintaining, and interpreting Mount Diablo State Park for the benefit of the public. Through a continuing program of education, sponsored activities, and publications, MDIA fosters appreciation and the enlightened use of the park. It remains all volunteer and raises funds through the sales of merchandise in its gift shops on the mountain and online, and in addition to donations and membership support. There's a great many resources to help you enjoy Mount Diablo, one of which I'm very proud of, and that's mdia.org. Online, you can find a wildflower guide, bird guides, natural and cultural history articles, park information, of course, our MDIA store, a list of upcoming events, past event recordings, and Audible Mount Diablo. I mentioned we developed a companion film, and that is part of our Audible Mount Diablo series, which began as a podcast-oriented endeavor, but now includes film and video and photos to round out your experience. We have almost 20 different films available to view, each divided into 3 to 4 minute segments covering different topics on the mountain. You can find those on our website, including the 25-minute film, A Brief History of Mount Diablo, which you'll be sure to check out. It's really a great resource. The summit, this is the homepage of mdia.org. The Summit Visitor Center, MDIA is proud to have played a major part in raising funds for the construction of the museum inside. And it was dedicated in 1993 and renovated in 2010. The museum features wildlife exhibits, historical artifacts, geology exhibits, a scale 3D model of the mountain, and the media room offers visitors a chance to learn more about the park through the showing of our brand new film. Once COVID releases its grips and we reopen the media room, you can enjoy the film there as well. The gift shop is a great place to find souvenirs and publications on all aspects of the mountain, as well as convenience items like ice cream to make the trek to the summit more complete. MDIA has also created and now manages the Mitchell Canyon Visitor Center in Clayton. A major undertaking is in progress to build a new visitor center there to replace the old and aging trailer erected in 1999. Fundraising and capital campaigns will be starting soon to fund this new state-of-the-art, ecologically sensitive hub for school groups, nature groups, and the general public to come learn, study, and enjoy the natural beauty of the mountain. MDIA also operates its own webinars in our Mountain Talks series. What was used to be an in-person event at the Ignacio Valley Library has morphed into a Zoom event. And when we resume in person, we will do a hybrid model. You can find upcoming webinars on our website, on the events page, and recordings of past webinars to enjoy a variety of topics. Mount Diablo State Park is such a gem to all of us who live and grew up here. It's important to so many people and has been for thousands of years. And so people are very passionate about the mountain. I'm sure you are too, that you've set aside an hour of your day to learn more about it. So please come out and visit us. Check out our website first to plan your stay and enjoy the mountain and our 100th anniversary. And pick up some of our swag. Our Centennial merchandise is available in the Summit building. All right, thank you. I think we'll take some questions here, Ellen, right?
Right, so let me pull up the Q&A. Let's see, here's the first question. What happened to the indigenous people after the Spanish/Mexican government took over? Were they
So they
elsewhere?
existed. Yes, they existed in small bands and continue to thrive today. We're just producing a new film by a couple of Ohlone members who have a restaurant, an Ohlone restaurant opening up on the college campus at Cal Berkeley. And so they are still very involved and consider Mount Diablo so sacred to them. They raise their families on the flanks of Mount Diablo and visit it often. And they would ask you not to view their plight as having been tragic, but to celebrate their accomplishment of having Mount Diablo remain so important in their lives for thousands and thousands of years and many generations.
What are the top 3 hikes you recommend?
Well, season dependent, of course. Wildflowers are something near and dear to me. When I was out hiking and had trouble seeing live animals, I decided to start looking for wildflowers instead. They don't move on you. And so we have several hundred different varieties. And so the best hikes usually take in those. From Mitchell Canyon, an easy hike is up Mitchell Canyon Road. And there's so many wildflowers there. You can also make a loop out of it going up, around and back down Back Creek Trail, which is a beautiful place. As I mentioned, the Mary Bowerman Trail is popular at the summit, and the wildflowers there occur kind of later in the year because of the elevation. And so when things have dried up lower, you can still find stuff blooming higher up. And then third, a place near and dear to my heart is Madrone Canyon, which you can find a shady respite on a warm day. It's particularly lovely in the fall with the madrone trees and the manzanita shedding their bark. And it's just a great place year round. So many other places to mention, but I'll keep to those 3.
What kind of tolls were there when the road to the summit was first built?
Yes, so the original tolls back in 1921 were about $1 for automobiles. Cattle were 5 cents a head, sheep were 2 cents a head. So if you look at inflation over the last 100 years, your $10 entrance fee now is actually a pretty good bargain.
And are there plans to expand the park at all, or at least talked about?
Yes, so I talked about Save Mount Diablo and the fact that they're preserving lands around it. We have over 20,000 acres in the state park, and with East Bay Regional Parks, other local parks, Save Mount Diablo properties, there's almost 100,000 acres of preserved land in and around the Diablo Valley. So while we recognize borders of parks and properties, wildlife does not. So these wildlife corridors are very important. Save Mount Diablo preserves its properties always with the thought of turning it back over to the state park at some point, but it becomes a fiscal management problem, so that hasn't occurred yet. But the park itself is always expanding in for its wildlife.
So I understand there's a picnic area named for John Muir. So did he visit the mountain because he didn't live that far away?
Yes. So John Muir was famous for sauntering up the mountain. He liked to call his hikes saunters. And he would start out from his home in Martinez at the National Historic Park there and work his way up to Mount Diablo. He did so one fine day went up to the summit, found himself a little spot there and camped out overnight. And then the following morning went down to the Mountain House Hotel, had breakfast, and wrote a little bit about it in his diary, and went back home to Martinez. So we do have a picnic area named Mirror Picnic Area, and there's also a dedication spot to him on the mountain.
Is the summit building back open now?
It is. So the gift shop is open. We try to limit the number of people in there at the same time. Mask rules apply. And then intermittently, the museum is open. And of course, the observation deck remains open all the time. But the building is staffed from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. 7 days a week.
Okay. So I understand from things I've read that there's a California condor who's been visiting the vicinity of Mount Diablo.
Yes. Yeah, so an exciting thought. Of course, we all know that the California condors are making a comeback, and largely through banding and preservation efforts down in the pinnacles. But they have been seen for years flying further and further north. They've been seen out towards the Livermore area and the wind turbines out there. And then most recently, one made its way around onto Save Mount Diablo property and towards Mount Diablo State Park. So they're getting closer and closer. Wildlife biologists talk about the idea of them setting up shop in Pine Canyon, where we have our peregrine falcon nesting sites. The condors could easily use those cliffs themselves and wouldn't compete with the peregrine falcon directly. So it's an amazing animal, an amazing sight it would be to see overhead this 10 to 12 foot wingspan flying across the sky. So one day soon.
So there's a lot of stonework up at the top. So does that get inspected after earthquakes, or are there concerns?
It's done pretty well. It was built very well. Of course, the mountain is fairly rock solid up there. What does occur regularly is that we have a team of dedicated amateur volunteer stonemasons who are renovating all of the Diablo stoves. There's a particular type of rock stove throughout the park in which to cook meals on. And so they have been renovating, starting at Live Oak Campground up through Rock City, and doing a lot of stone work that way. And they're still trying to quarry much of that stone on the mountain. So rock work does continue in the park.
So if people were interested in volunteering through Mount Diablo Interpretive, what kinds of jobs, or not necessarily paid jobs, but types of activities do people typically do?
Sure. There's two different ways to volunteer on Mount Diablo. One is through and for the state park itself. We have a program called the VIPP, or Volunteers in Parks program, and that entails a 3-hour training with some fingerprinting, and that allows you to volunteer in the park itself. You can take further training and be a docent at the visitor center in Mitchell Canyon. A lot of people like to be roving docents, in which they hike or bike or ride their horses through the park and help fellow users out when they're in a jam, or direct them to the best trails. And there's other like park maintenance, trail maintenance, all those types of activities. And that's through the state park. You can also volunteer for MDIA itself, and that involves more clerical type work, distributing our newsletters throughout the community, maybe folding some shirts every now and again, licking stamps, things like that. And we're also always looking for interested parties who have specific skills to become board directors. We're launching a capital campaign and looking for people who have marketing backgrounds or backgrounds in fundraising and things like that. So both of those opportunities you can get to on our website, and we'll hook you up with the right people.
Okay. So I'm going to ask one last question I see here, since I will let you go back to your work for the day. Is snow very common on the peak?
It is off and on. Every couple years, it seems to dump quite a bit. We always kind of gauge it by how far down the mountain it comes. When it comes down below the Junction Ranger Station, it is a madhouse up there with news vans and people with skis and snowshoes and everything else making their way up. It's really beautiful. It's really quite special when a big snowstorm hits the very top. You all know, with pine trees and the quiet that comes with snow. It's really quite spectacular up there, and a really special time. It always seems to happen during the week. So for those of us in school or at work, unless you can take the day off, it's often melted by the time you can get to it on the following weekend. So you have to take advantage while it's there.
All right, well, let me wrap up and say this has been truly an extraordinarily packed hour worth of information. And I'm going to say, well, I've lived, looking at it for, over 40 years. I probably knew 10% of what you said. So very informative. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.